Welcome to the Save What You Love podcast. I'm your host, Mark Titus. I should say welcome back. We're in a reboot of the show. And I wanted to take a minute before we get into our first amazing guest, Ash Rodriguez, to just tell you where I've been here for the last year. There's been a lot going on, and it's all been pretty good. It's been a lot of growth. It's been a lot of learning, a little bit of grief. To start out, we have been growing as a company. As you may know, SWYL is a salmon business that I founded in 2019 to answer the question, what can I do to help? After every single screening of The Breach in the wild, I'd go out on stage and folks would ask, hey, listen, I want to do something every day with my dollars, my voice, and my vote. So we came up with basically a company that says, hey, you can do all that in one place. We source wild Bristol Bay sockeye salmon from the most sustainable fishery on the planet, and 10% of the profits that come out of that business go back to the region. Specifically, right now, we're giving to the Bristol Bay Foundation, which gives 4-year college scholarships and trade school scholarships to Bristol Bay's Indigenous young people. And so we've been building that company up and really focusing on chef relationships throughout the Pacific Northwest and now the West Coast and around the country soon enough. So look for Ava's Wild Bristol Bay Sockeye on your favorite award-winning restaurateurs' menus soon. Also, I've been filming The Turn, which is the third installment and the final chapter in my Breach trilogy. My original love and impetus for all of this for wild salmon and protecting wild salmon resources, streams, rivers, and bioregions for future generations. I'd say we're about 80% filmed, and we're going to be finishing this summer with principal photography, looking to wrap up the film hopefully by the end of the year and move into a festival run and then a tour around the country, knocking on some wood here, that barring another global pandemic which shut down a 50-city tour of my previous film, The Wild. And lastly, my dad passed away in October of 2023. And all of the activity coming to that point really led me to a place where I needed to take some time to grieve and to be with my family and to reflect on the life of the man that instilled my love for wild and the wild things and wild places in the first place. So with a nod to my dad, Gil Titus, I wanted to start up this show again, and we've got a great season ahead, starting with Ash Rodriguez. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about her right now. Welcome to the Save What You Love podcast. I'm your host, Mark Titus. Today's guest on our show is Ash Rodriguez. Ash is a Seattle-based award-winning food writer and photographer and filmmaker. She's the author of 3 cookbooks, most recently Rooted Kitchen, which has come out here in the spring of 24. And Ash is also the host and co-creator of the James Beard nominated series Kitchen Unnecessary. Beautiful, meaningful, authentic. It's got it all. I can't recommend it enough. I'm really excited for you guys to check this out. And you can grab it in the show notes. There's links to that and all of Ash's stuff in this episode's show notes. Kitchen Unnecessary is an online series which uncovers the world of wild foods through foraging, fishing, and regenerative harvesting. Ash and her work have been featured in Outside Magazine, Food and Wine, Saveur, Epicurious, Edible Seattle, and many, many more. Ash is a graduate of and guide for Seminary of the Wild Earth through the Center for Wild Spirituality and a certified Nature and Forest Therapy Guide through the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy Guides. I think we can all use one of those. Me most definitely here in the immediate. In this episode, we dive into living in the awe of the Pacific Northwest, Ash's early years and trajectory to her current work, soul shining through Ash's work in Kitchen Unnecessary, writing 3 books, creating media, raising a family, and avoiding burnout, spiritual callings, descending into ashes, why food tastes better cooked over a fire, and more good stuff. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Ash Rodriguez.
How do you say what you love when the world is burning down? How do you say what you love when pushes come to shove? How do you say what you love when things are upside down? How do you say what you love when times are getting tough?
Ashley Rodriguez, welcome. Where are you today?
I am in my home in Seattle, Washington, in a quiet little corner of the city, which we love so much.
What neighborhood are you in?
North Beach. I don't know, it's like if people only come down this area if you live down here. So, I mean, we've lived in Seattle for years and years and never knew anything about it, but it's via the beach. It's right in between Golden Gardens and Carkeek.
Oh, fantastic. So you're near the annual salmon migration in Carkeek Park in November, which is awesome.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I missed it last year, but I went 2 years ago. I would go like almost every day because I would drop my kids off at school and then stop there. And I was just like, oh, I was so giddy. That was incredible.
It is. It's one of the premium parts of living here, and obviously, I'm fully enthralled and involved with that whole world. But that's cool that you're in that neighborhood.
Yeah, my husband actually, there's been a couple mornings where he'll just grab his pole and go down to the beach and throw it in. But we've got a couple of fishing kayaks and we'll put them in at Shoal. And I've never had luck catching salmon off the kayak, but I think it was like 3 years ago, one of the pink years, my husband just like every time he would go out there, he would catch something. It was so cool.
It's literally the gift that keeps on giving. And I have fished. I have not successfully caught, I should say, off of Carkeek, but I have fished for and seen people catch cutthroat trout. So with a
wow,
with a 5 weight and some little fry patterns, super fun if you haven't done that, and we can talk about that offline a little bit. But
yeah, I would love to because I actually a couple years ago for his birthday I got him like a guided trip for sea run, and I think not even we didn't catch anything on that guided trip, but on like another time he caught one like that was like that big, but that's the only one he's ever caught, and he was so happy with.
It's
we'll
funny.
We'll talk.
That's right. It's funny, right? The perspective of giant fish, when you've got these expectations out in the saltwater, but then getting like a 4-inch brook trout in a little tiny mountain stream is the same feeling.
Oh yeah.
It's just so great.
I have a picture of like that very moment. Like my arms are up in the air and I'm just like so happy.
That's so great.
Yeah.
So your handle online is Ashrod. Do you go by Ash, Ashley? What's the inside scoop for the cool kids to call you?
Yeah, I really prefer Ash.
Wonderful. Well, the Ash it is from this point forward.
My grandfather, who is Frisian, he used to call me Yiska, which literally means ash or ashes in Frisian. Oh. So it's also feel like I've been called Ash most of my life, and it feels very fitting, especially considering how much I love cooking over the fire.
Okay, so there's a perfect genesis for this conversation. How do you feel about identifying with your name Ash? You just gave me one aspect of that. Is there a deeper meaning to it in identifying and really wanting to have that be the expression of yourself?
Oh, that's such an incredible question and so timely. It's really funny because like my mom said, she was like, yeah, we were either going to name you Ashley or Marika. And I feel like those couldn't be more opposite just because like, I was born in the 80s and Ashley was like it was like Ashley and Jessica, number one names. And I don't like being like other people. And so to grow up with this, like this desire to be different, but then Also, then having a name like Ashley, it never fully felt like it fit.
Mm.
Um, and then I remember, like in middle school when you're really just trying to like find your identity, and I was like, well, maybe it's partly to do with my name. And I remember looking at the meaning of my name, and it means like dweller in the meadow of ash trees. And I was like, what does that even mean? I don't know. I don't know. Um, so yeah, I'm like, of course it means dweller in the meadow of ash trees. Like that's totally fitting. But I think for me, um, shortening it to ash just feels a little bit. It just, it's kind of funny. Like it just sounds more me,
I like
feels
that.
more me, and I think only people can know that for themselves.
That's very, very true. And we'll come back to this a little later on. Being in ashes, being in a time of, for real, like in a
Yeah.
time of darkness or grief, these are things that we tend to eschew as, especially here in the Western culture. But it's a really necessary thing, and grief is a great healer. It's a great awakener, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But
Oh, I'm excited.
yeah, so for now, let's start with the good stuff. Tell us your story. Where'd you grow up, and how did you get to do and come to the good work that you're doing now?
Mm. So I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. I grew up in Bellingham. Um, and, I never really realized how much the outdoors were a part of my life until kind of reflecting and then having these solid core memories of, the woods were in our backyard. And I remember just kind of like running out with my neighbors and my brothers and like tasting huckleberries along the way and just it was like the natural world was a backdrop that I wasn't super paying attention to, but then you kind of come to realize like no, it was actually like a
Hmm.
major character. And because growing up with all of these plants and these smells and these associations that have just like deeply embedded with me. But then life happens and I was trying to figure out, like what do I want to do with my career? And I was studying art and was planning on being a high school art teacher. And then part of my art study brought me to Italy. I lived over there for about half a year and fell in love with food, as you do when you're living in Italy. But even more than the food, well, maybe not more than the food because the food is just phenomenal, but like equal to the food was the kind of the lifestyle and the culture that happens around food and the respect for the ingredients and then also the respect for the time to gather with people and take the time to nourish yourself and to nourish the relationships. Um, I fell in love with just this, like the sacredness that would happen around the table. And what am I going to do with my career? I realized that people actually make a living in food, and how could I do this? And um, so I started working in kitchens, and my husband and I, newly married, ended up moving to LA where I worked in a kitchen there. Um, and we ended up moving back to the Northwest when we found out we were pregnant with our first. And it was kind of like, again, that big pivot of I thought my life was going this way, and then this happened. And what am I going to do? How am I going to continue to build on this passion while also building a family? And that's when I started blogging and going back to that original lesson that I learned in Italy. I wanted to tell people about life around the table and not just share recipes and not just, like, because there's incredible resources for recipes, but what am I bringing to the table? Um, and then cut to 3 kids later, they're growing up, kind of evolving. I've been working in food, 2 cookbooks in, and my brother and I started a project we called Kitchen Unnecessary, and it was born around the campfire where 17 of us, my brothers and our families, and my parents would go camping every summer. And I was where anytime people are gathered, I'm like, okay, what delicious food are we going to be eating? And I loved challenging myself with what can I create at the campfire, like a Dijon cream sauce and fondue around the fire. And my brother, who's a filmmaker, we were just dreaming of like, is there something here? Can we do this? And we were both kind of starting to dabble in mushroom foraging. And our first episode was dreamed up around that campfire where we went out foraging for chanterelles with Daniel Winkler. And he showed us, yes, we found some chanterelles, but he just opened up like so many more mushrooms to me than I realized. And then that just started this whole thing. And that was also at the same time I was sort of in this process of like getting hurt by religion, stepping away from the church, and yet still feeling this like deep spirituality, and was finding it more and more, like finding peace, and just feeling better mentally, physically, spiritually while I was outside. But those questions led me to eco spirituality and forest therapy, and ultimately led me to creating my third cookbook, which is just out now, called Root Kitchen, which is this using food as a way of deepening your connection to the earth, and recognizing that how interconnected we all are, and we are indeed a part of nature. Because ultimately, I think until we have that relationship with the earth, we aren't really going to make a huge impact on climate change and caring for our planet and one another. And so I think the roots really are born from that, shifting that perspective and that relationship.
Thank you. I identify with so much of what you just said. We're going to dive into all of the things that you talked about, but I want to start with Kitchen Unnecessary. It is beautifully made. I mean, congratulations on super high production value. It's gorgeous, but I also get real glimpses of that deeper light inside you, like taking nine deep breaths on the shore of a trout stream in Montana. Can you tell us about that moment and what's at the core of this series, given that idea about that light within you and your work?
Yeah, so it's so interesting because, I mean, we haven't shot a new episode since prior to the pandemic. We had to shut down, obviously, like so many productions did, and then life has happened. And it was really like, I feel like as you're watching the episodes of Kitchen Unnecessary, the behind the scenes, or you can start to see it, like I am changing as a result of these incredible people that we are connecting with and meeting with. And that episode that you mentioned with Ranga, who is actually like a Reiki guide and teacher, and such an incredible story of his own, and taught me something that I was already intuitively feeling when I was out on the river, but brought it to a level with such intention. And that was this, yeah, let's have this mindful moment before we step into the river. And again, that moment of gratitude and taking a deep breath of, here we are, how incredible we get to do this. And for me, fishing, I don't do it as often as I would like, but that moment where I start to like, it's all about the catch, is when I step away and say, no, this is not why I'm doing this, or like getting super frustrated and my line's getting tangled and it's like,
What? That never happens.
This is not the point. This is, yeah. It's like, okay, that's when I need to step back. So like those episodes of that series are me waking up to that curiosity that I was just talking about, because of these great guides and people that we got to connect with. And the moose hunt in Alaska was also so incredibly powerful for me, because, I love animals and yet I eat them. And how do we reconcile this?
Mm-hmm.
And I so respect the spiritual teachings and beliefs of the indigenous community, and how do they, so that was a profound moment for me as well, in understanding um, the honoring and the gratitude for these creatures. And
And Ash, which episode
so
is that one you're describing?
Alaska, we did a two-part series. I think it's
Part two.
episode 4 and 5. Or yeah,
Great.
yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Totally get that that challenge of this love for these animals and the need to eat. And you certainly going vegan is a honorable choice, and I am
Absolutely.
all over that. For a variety of reasons, protein needs and that deep and sacred honoring. That's the place that I met salmon. At the
Mm,
side of a boat with my dad. Bringing that fish over the side of the boat. First encounter was 2 years old, and then taking it home. The whole encounter is a mystery, and it's beautiful and it's sparkling, and you've got all these, you know, things, little sparkly squids and flashers and dodgers, and all the things. Same with fly fishing. Same with hunting. There's ritual associated with
mhm,
it. But then you get down to the real brass tacks of this is I've taken a life and it's
yeah.
given its life to me, and it's going to sustain life in me. I'm It's pretty astonishing that you're able to capture that in your episodes. I mean, what's do you have a favorite episode at this point? Is there an episode that has changed you in a way that the others didn't? Can you speak to that?
I think they've all changed me in different ways. And I don't have a favorite, because I'm like replaying them in my head, and each of them brings up these incredible memories and delights. But I think, yeah, you mentioned the fishing in Montana, and
Hmm.
just meeting Ranga, who continues to be a friend to this day. And that was really, really powerful, because I also like, um, he spoke a language that I understood about, or that like was, kind of starting to awaken in me. But yet I'm like, am I just being silly? What is, like,
Hmm.
these insecurities that would come up. And again, like, I was kind of leaving behind organized religion, but like some of the things that were um, off limits to me before were kind of starting to make sense. And that whole trip was, we went salmon fishing and mushroom foraging, and um, the moose hunt, and then like preparing this absolute incredible feast on a glacier. Um, it was incredibly stunning, and I think that's part of the like what almost completes the cycle of honoring for me, is trying to do justice to the ingredients that we've been gifted by the earth. And that was a real stunning feast.
How does it make you feel physically when you harvest cattails or a moose or a salmon? And how does it make you feel in two steps? One, in the preparing of that food, and two, in the eating in company,
Mm,
in community with the food. What are the physical feelings you're going through in those processes?
mm. I feel so many things, and I love that question, because I feel um childlike, particularly on when I'm foraging, because it just feels like a treasure hunt. Um, but ultimately, I think I to forage, to fish, to hunt, you have to work for your ingredients, right? These things don't necessarily come easy. I mean, sometimes this last fall of mushroom hunting, we got into porcini, and it felt it felt easy. And that was, I still feel the absolute delight and immense gratitude, I think, is the biggest thing. Like, there was I think it's Andreas Weber who said something about feeling or seeing the earth loving you in return, or being seen by the earth. And it just hit me of like, is it possible for the earth, the trees, the animals to be delighting in me in the same way that I'm delighting in them, or even just a fraction of it? And so to be like offered up these gifts of these incredible ingredients, I feel that in my bones. Like, I feel so deeply loved and cared for. And that is what I talk about in that reciprocal relationship that Robin Wall Kimmerer talks about so beautifully in Braiding Sweetgrass, which then makes me just want to deeply care for the earth. It's this, I'm overwhelmed with gratitude, overwhelmed with loving feelings. How can I give that back? And that's what I want to help other people experience.
Amen to that. It's beautiful, and you have a new book coming out. You've written 3 books: Date Night In, Let's Stay In, and your newest book is called Rooted Kitchen. I confess I haven't read it yet, but I am so intrigued.
It's a brand new one.
Oh, I can't wait. It looks beautiful. And just from the description of it, I definitely feel a calling to shift more toward, and maybe even exclusively, a wild food diet at some point. And I know that's not totally what the book's about. But can you tell me how this book and that notion of wildness in your seeking of food and a lifestyle and even a spirituality around food came to you and was channeled into this book?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you talk about like, in that last question too, like that, what feelings do I feel around these ingredients and while eating them? And I do feel like, without sounding too woo-woo, but I'm not really afraid of that at this point. But
you're in a woo-woo safe zone here. It's all good.
Okay, good. There is a different energy, I feel like, when you're consuming wild ingredients. And listen, I love a good bag of chips, and I can't fully stay away from some processed things, but there is this like, yeah, I don't know how to describe it, and I can't, so I won't even try to put words to it. So Rooted Kitchen is, like I said, it is this, my way of using food as to help deepen your connection to the earth. There are some foraged ingredients, including there's several recipes using nettles, which I think is like the foraging gateway, because they're really easy to find, easy to identify. They grow, which I love this so much. They grow in places where people are. And that to me is also just this invitation of like, pick me, consume me, use me. They also come at the end of winter, at the very, very start of spring, and they provide our bodies with nutrients that help us waken up, help our bodies wake up, come out of hibernation, which I just think is so cool. And also for me, and there are studies that have been done on this, but like, I have noticed if I consume a lot of nettles at the beginning of spring, then my allergies towards the end of spring are less. Like, it just keeps going on and on and on about how these plants and these ingredients take care of us. And it's also just such a fun excuse to get out and go for a walk. And so there's ingredients like that, and maple blossoms. There are some wild mushroom recipes, of course, and I give, each season has different techniques, and so there's a kind of a beginning primer on how to forage and what's a good way to get started, because I know it's very intimidating for people, and we live in a very like fungophobic culture. But I've not been doing this my entire life, and so I still remember feeling overwhelmed by the amount of knowledge and worrying about eating the wrong thing. And so I
Mm-hmm.
kind of break down how I got started,
Nice.
some incredible resources. But ultimately, this book it's rooted in the seasons, and there's a lot of essays and things to kind of help deepen into how to pay attention, um, be aware, and be grateful for what we are consuming.
That's pretty beautiful. Can't wait to pick up a copy. We'll have that linked in the show notes. Halftime. Did you know you could have the world's finest wild salmon shipped directly to your door? It's true. Our Ava's Wild Bristol Bay sockeye salmon is the lowest carbon footprint center plate protein on the planet, and it's packed with heart-healthy omega-3 fatty acids. Don't take our word for it. Ask chefs like Seattle's Tom Douglas and Taichi Kitamura, who are serving our sashimi-grade wild salmon in their award-winning restaurants. You can have the exact same fillets we deliver to them shipped flash frozen to your door. What's more, Ava's Wild donates 10% of our profits to indigenous-led efforts to protect Bristol Bay in perpetuity. That's the place we source the salmon from. Right now, that looks like supporting the Bristol Bay Foundation, granting Bristol Bay's indigenous young people scholarships to four-year colleges, universities, and trade schools. Visit avaswild.com to join our growing community doing good by eating right. That's save, spelled backwards, wild.com, and eat wild to save wild. Now, back to the show. Can you speak a little bit more to that, getting over that hump of the, you said it really well, but that inability to get going on foraging, just like it seems overwhelming. Like there's no way I'm gonna know what mushrooms to pick. Like what's some good first step, toe in the pool advice for folks that want to get going on enjoying and being a part of the world around them through a foraged experience?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I went from not liking eating mushrooms to now I actually have a book coming out in the fall about mushrooms. Like I so
Amazing.
it's been a journey for me because now I love mushrooms and not just the edible varieties. I just think they are such an incredible um testimony to the earth, and again this interconnectedness, because literally there's mycelium connecting everything.
Mm-hmm.
So just be careful, because you might start down a path where you become a super passionate about all sorts of mushrooms. Now I'm like, I go out on walks, I'm like, there's a mushroom, there's a mushroom, there's a mushroom. um And I think the way that I started digging into it is saying, okay, I started with chanterelles. I knew that they grew around here. I knew that people would find them. I knew what they looked like. Um, I just wanted to, if I could, without a doubt, identify chanterelles, that would be a major win for
Mm.
me. Um, and so, reading about the dangerous lookalikes, what habitat they typically grow in. Um, Chanterelles have what's called like a mycorrhizal relationships with different trees, different plants. And so you get to know their surroundings, which I think is also a really cool thing about mushrooms, is that like I went out with my friend Langdon Cook one time,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we were out looking for um, morels, and he was like, heard a bird call, and he's like, yeah, usually when I start to hear that bird singing, I know that the morels are coming, or so, it's just like, what an incredible practice of paying attention. And there's certain flowers that, when you see these flowers blooming, you know that this mushroom is about to pop, or things like that, which I just think is so, so cool. But basically, every season, I kind of create my wish list of what do I want to find? What do I want to identify? And, have anywhere from 2 to 5 different species that are like my season bucket list. And I go for those. And after a few years, you've got an incredible knowledge. And what happens when you go out year after year, like I've gotten to the point where, and my husband uh, does this as well now too. Like you're walking in the forest and all of a sudden you're like you just start sniffing and whether or not you're actually smelling the mushroom, like there are times where I'm like, I smell mushrooms, and sometimes it's just like, oh yeah, it's the ones that are in my basket. But sometimes it's this like, oh, I see this type of moss, there's this plant growing, there's this tree, like it's, and I'm not fully consciously registering all of this information, but something in my body and my being knows there must be a chanterelle around here. And then sure enough, we start looking and it's like, oh, there's one right there. It's a really, really cool thing that happens, but you got to put in the time, and don't try and identify every single mushroom your first time out there. Goes with a couple of specifics that you're looking for, and take pictures of every mushroom you find, and then come back and try and identify those. Um, it's a constant treasure hunt, and that's the thing that I did start off by going like, this is the mushroom that I want, and that, that's what that episode with Daniel Winkler, our very first episode, was like. He's like, oh yeah, you can eat this one, and oh, this one is this, and that, and then my mind was just like, wait, what? Like I went in thinking like, no, I'm just here for the chanterelles. um, it's an exciting world out there.
Well, I have to admit trepidation and being intimidated myself. Of all of the natural processes in harvesting, I have no experience with mushrooms. It's been on my list for years, and I am supercharged hearing you speak about this to get my butt out there. I know a few people that know a few things, so it's just a matter of doing
Yeah.
it, and
Well, hey, if you
prioritizing
take
that.
me out salmon fishing, I'll take you out mushroom foraging.
Done. Date. We're
I'm not
doing it.
joking.
No, I'm not. I'm not joking either. Boats in the water, May 1st, down the hill.
Okay.
So we'll talk.
Perfect. Yeah.
Beautiful. I read on your site, when we become more connected to the outdoors through our food, it sparks a deeper connection to ourselves, and obviously, I think, to this natural world that sustains us. What I'm hearing from you is a lot about paying attention, and paying attention comes when we slow down, when we get quiet.
Mm-hmm.
You have a very high output. You can't put out the quality of work that you're putting out at the frequency you're putting it out without having a very high output and a tremendous amount of energy expended. What keeps you going, and how do you avoid burnout?
Mm. Um,
Asking for a
well, I don't
friend.
think I have. Yeah, I was like, I don't think I have successfully avoided burnout throughout my entire career. I really slowed down and went deeply inward during the pandemic. As a result, I'm quite certain of burnout, and I see creative life as this sort of cycle. I think Brene Brown talks about it as being this kind of inhaling and exhaling. Um, Rick Rubin talks about it so beautifully in The Creative Act.
He does. I just read that.
And oh my gosh, it's so good. And I've had, like, and I continue to be in this sort of season of like, what am I doing? The internet is loud. There's incredible people are putting out incredible content left and right, and I get stuck in that comparing trap, and oh, I need to sell this, and I need to do this, and I need to be this, and then I go and stare at my lilac tree, or I go and I work out in the garden and literally ground myself. And what I try and share online are the result of me living in that way of paying attention and seeking the beauty and the gratitude in that. And that's what I want to share, and for people to experience. It's kind of ironic, and I'm sure the algorithm doesn't necessarily favor my content because so much of what my purpose in what I put on Instagram and on my social media and in my newsletter is to like get people to shut down their computer and get outside. So however I can do that. So yeah, I'm not one of those that's like encouraging people to stay online as much as possible.
Well,
Which doesn't
yeah.
doesn't bode well for any sort of algorithm, but um, those moments that I am caught in awe and wonder is what I then try and be like, oh, take a picture of that. Like right now I speak so much in Rooted Kitchen of, I'm staring literally at her right now, this lilac tree that we've been living in our house now for about 8 years. And she was blooming when we moved in. And so often this is kind of where I'm sitting right now is my sit spot practice where I just kind of sit and watch. And so I've been staring at this lilac tree for years and years and watching her go through the seasons and recognizing that she spends most of the year with bare branches. And we are just about in that 2 to 3 week span where her blooms are just incredible. So I've been doing this Lilac Watch 2024 on my social because that is literally me sharing my excitement and enthusiasm for watching these flowers bloom. And but I also get excited watching her in every season, and it's always a good reminder of most of the time she's bare branches and then she has this moment of bloom and it's okay, then she kind of retreats, and like it says a lot about the creative life too, right?
I got nothing to add. I don't really care about the algorithm. You've got my attention. And, for listeners in this community know full well, I'm a man in recovery, coming up on 7 years of continuous sobriety. And
That's amazing.
yeah, thanks very much. And we talk about in our community about progress, not perfection. And I measure this progress piece, which is important to do because doers, like I'll just speak for myself, I often keep going in the flow, just keep charging forward and don't take time to celebrate or don't take time to pay attention. But one node of that progress is very much in line with what you're talking about. Yesterday, took the pups up the street. Everything's in bloom here in Queen Anne. The cherries are still some out in some spots, the cherry blossoms, and there's a giant oak tree up near where we are, and it's got to have a 9-foot base trunk, and I lost all sense of time and all sense of mission and busyness standing in the shadow of this tree yesterday. And, the dogs are looking at me like, Dad, let's keep going. Come on. We got stuff to do. We got stuff to sniff. And that was that moment of progress for me, paying attention, getting quiet. And I think this is something that we all struggle with, people that are attuned to what's happening in the world and wanting to do something, be a part of something bigger than ourselves, change things. But it seems that the answer many times is in literally doing nothing and pausing to stop at all motion and pay attention, as you are so eloquently describing. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Go
And
ahead.
so often is the case that like the teachers are the ones who need that message the most. So I'm putting this out there not because I've mastered it, but because I need to remind myself on a daily basis to do the same thing. And that's what Ranga also talked about. The moment that we stepped into the river, he's like, I'm not doing this because I'm some deeply meditative soul. I'm doing this because I have to remind myself to breathe and to stop. And, so I think it's a good reminder too of also when we see others on social media, no one's got it figured out. And so this is really not true. Something I have figured it all out. I am saying this because I am reminding myself.
Well, I'm right there with you. Thanks for the reminder. I'm going to read a couple
Yeah.
quotes for you and then get into our next piece here. Here's the first quote. You know both of them, I'm sure, at this point. The old story is no longer effective, yet we have not learned the new story. We are talking only to ourselves. We are not talking to the rivers. We are not listening to the wind and stars. We have broken the great conversation. That's by Thomas Berry.
Mm-hmm.
And the second quote is by Victoria Lures from Church of the Wild. And she says, more and more of us are listening to the call to repair the great conversation and return to intimacy with the rest of the alive and sacred world. This is the foundation for any ecological and spiritual regeneration. Okay, so in that context, I'm making a film called The Turn. On one layer, it's about salmon, and it's about that mystical turn they make way out in the middle of the Pacific, in the gyres of the North. Some moment they decide, okay, it's time to come home. But it's also about us. Are we capable of making that turn as human beings as well? Listening to a higher calling, listening to that great conversation again, picking it back up. So, with all of that backdrop in mind, tell me about what led you to graduate from and become a guide for Seminary of the Wild Earth.
Oh my gosh, I've got goosebumps. It's so good. Okay, so again, this was during the pandemic. And we had taken a pause on Kitchen Unnecessary, but I was reveling in the lessons that I've been learning and the people that I've been spending time with and what I was experiencing out in the natural world. And an email landed in my inbox from Seminary of the Wild Earth. I did something with them. I went on a retreat, but didn't think anything of it. And I had been getting these emails, and then there was this one time it landed, and I opened it up, and I immediately forwarded it to my husband, and I said, I think I need to apply. Like it was this moment of like, oh, this is for me right now. So I got on the phone with Victoria and told her about this crazy mystical experience that I had just had out in the woods, my first time camping by myself. That's a whole other story. And she was like, I don't tell this to everyone, but this, I believe, is for you. This program's for you. So I went through their year-long program, and my hope and intention for that was to sort of add strength to the voice, to the curiosities that were building in me. And that's something that we were talking about earlier of like, you know, I was like tiptoeing into this because again of like my foundation of faith that I was brought up with is this. It felt a little dangerous. It felt really scary. All my protective parts were like, no, like it's almost, like we are a tribal people. You're leaving the tribe. This is dangerous. So I'm like, okay, can I do this in a safe place on Zoom? No one really knew that I was doing this, and it's a hard program to describe anyway. So even if I did tell people, I couldn't really put it into words, but I was surrounded by people who had these same curiosities, who felt similar, this calling to the natural world, this wanting to be a part of the great conversation. We read Thomas Berry, Andreas Weber, Victoria Lures, I'm Mary Oliver, all the Robin Wall Kimmerer, of course, like all of these great, great teachers. And we, the biggest invitation that would happen on a weekly basis was to spend time outside. And so that's when I picked up the practice of a sit spot, and I journaled so much and learned the importance of ceremony and ritual, and I just absolutely found community and strengthened that voice. And Victoria then asked me to be a guide and to be a part of that program. And I absolutely was honored and delighted. And so it was, and it was in the process of going through that program and kind of like, how do I want to share this? Because I find that's the natural part of the creative process too, of like you have this great, incredible experience, and then you just want to tell about it, or you learn something and you're like, I gotta tell people about this. So that to me is this process of art. Um, and so that was the next natural step for me, and that's where Rooted Kitchen was born. Of like, I still was, because I was like, am I leaving food, and am I done with that? But like again, going back to this lilac tree, I found out that lilacs are edible, and how do I honor these blooms? One, like I enjoy them. I bring them into my house. I smell them. I watch the bees and the birds and enjoy them as well. And also, I turn them into syrups and a jam to make this stunning pavlova. And, that to me is also a part of the honoring, like preserving the bloom, preserving this moment in the season. And I was like, that's it. Like, that is, I can use food as an invitation for deepening my own personal connection to the earth and then telling others about it.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ash. Speaking of, we in the West here want to avoid things that make us feel bad, and so we distract ourselves constantly. But the fact is that there's a dark side of life. Death is a part of life. Loss is a part of life. Grief is a big thing, and this is a world that has challenges that were not woven into the fabric of my upbringing, as a going on 52-year-old guy here. And there are things that are real and are challenging and are shadow work, and most great traditions, as you well know, because you are on your way with this, of course, and you're deeply involved, require a dropping into ashes, a loss of ego in order to transform. So given that, and given the work that you have done, you've just described so beautifully, in transformation, your mom too, what advice do you have for younger people who are having trouble figuring out how to embrace the tough things in life, and also figuring out how to make their way in this challenging world that we're in? What can you tell younger folks? And obviously you've got your own brood as well, but it's hard to find guides in I think in our Western culture, unless you get involved in a program like you have been involved in. Interestingly, I'm on a similar track with another group like that really spoke to me. So I'm just curious, what do you feel like? You're not, without dropping the ego, dropping the rock. No presumptions here about being a master or anything like that, but just based on what you've experienced in field, what can you offer to younger people?
This is definitely a question that's on my mind, and I'm like, I feel like I could sit with it, and I have been sitting with it. My oldest, feel emotion.
Good.
My oldest turns 18.
Wow.
In a few weeks. And, he's going to be in the house for a while yet, and we're not kicking him out by any means, but it's a significant age, right? It is this like, it's culturally and we've, like, it's a significant milestone, and how are we going to honor this? And I found myself frantic, like there's so much more I have to teach you, and also reminding myself that I will be a parent. I will be his parent for the rest of his life. And, but I find myself desperate to like write down all these like lessons from the deeply spiritual to the practical. Like, have I taught you the basics of like how to make a proper vinaigrette? Have I, you know? And also, like, I know how I know how life works. Like, he is on his own journey and he will find his own guides. I guess that's kind of been my prayer for each of my children, is that they, like, I think community is essential, and trust yourself as your own guide. I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I have learned deep into my adulthood, is that we actually are our best guides. And you know, I also believe that there's divinity within us that is speaking to us, and so there's this partnership with God, with the universe, whatever you want to call that presence. But I definitely think that's a huge part of it. Um, but trusting yourself, and I think in order to hear that message and to figure out what you're experiencing and learning, requires that slowing down and paying attention. And I think, you know, you talked so beautifully about our own need to to sit in the darkness and in the pain and the death and ashes, and what greater teacher than the natural world? I mean, we see this cycle every single year, like the beautiful trees and the blooms that I'm staring at. I mean, the beautiful leaves and the blooms that I'm staring at right now, they will fall and they will decompose. And what comes from that process is new life, rich soil, nutrients, not to just put a positive spin on death, and but it's a part of the process. So yeah.
It is. That's beautiful. I'm gonna. This is it's something that's been in my world and on my mind as well. But I to cap off this chapter of the conversation, just want to once again notice that taking that pause and noticing and being awake and aware is kind of where the magic happens. I had a happening a week ago where I was kind of roiled around. There was an event that happened that kind of rattled me a bit with a person, with a friend, and I've been sitting in it for a few days. And I was working at actually at the coffee shop nearby here. Lost the track of the time. It was 6:00 in the evening. My wife was away on business, so I had to get home and get the dogs. And I started furiously packing my stuff up, but I was still like, roiling around in my own brain here, and took a moment to say, "Look, what's going on here? I don't have this. I clearly don't have the juice to unravel this knot. So I surrender. I don't got this." And this, within 30 seconds of when that intention came out of me, this girl walked in the door, maybe 9 years old, and she had her Catholic schoolgirl outfit on and wearing a pink helmet with a flower sticking out of it. She walked up to there was nobody else in the coffee shop. Everybody's gone by this point, but she walked right up to my table, unfolded a piece of paper, and there were 4 flowers drawn on it. And she's like, "These are for you." And I'm looking around like, am I actually seeing this right now? Is this happening? And I'm like, why? And she's like, "Well, I just wanted to see you smile. And I've got these flowers outside for you." And I'm like, reeling. Okay, where are your parents? What are you doing out? What's going on? They're up the street. I've got flowers though. And I said, "Well, I have to pay you for them." She's like, I don't really need money. I do it for the smiles." And so I packed my stuff up. I go to the guy at the counter. I got a $50 bill. I'm like, can you cash this for me? And he's like, cash is gone for the day. And I turn around and I'm like, she's heading outside, and I grab I had a bookmark in my bag. So I'm like, at least I can give her something as a trade here, right?
Mm.
And I walk outside and she's gone. No kid. Up and down the street, gone. Take that for what you will. But the way that I'm looking at it is I could have chosen to be up in my head and still spinning on ego-filled, will-filled solving of my problems, and instead had this moment of saying, okay, I don't got this. And I could have completely ignored this kid or been, like whatever, but I'm here telling you this story now. So it was a moment of that pause, noticing, and it was a gift. No matter what, however you interpret it, it was a gift to me. It totally, completely opened a different dimensional doorway for me for the rest of the week. It was like all the rest of that grinding. I just sort of laughed and said, thank you. And that's it. We're moving on. So
oh my gosh.
I love this conversation about, sometimes we have to descend into this ash or this darkness or this place, but there's also that door is there, and it always seems to open the minute that I say I don't got this and I'm going to surrender to something else. Do you ever have a feeling like that?
Yeah. And I absolutely, and I will choose to believe that there was something mystical and sacred in that experience. And, like if I'm gonna, this is one of my like life philosophies. I'd rather err on the side of naivety than cynicism. And I'm going to choose to believe that there is some greater power working and mysteries that we are not able to solve that are at play in this. And again, that's sort of like going back to like trusting yourself as your guide. That's what feels right and true to me. And so in this moment, we shift and we grow, and when we learn more, we evolve. But that's what I believe in this moment. That's what feels right and true to me. And great. I don't need to know more than that.
That's exactly how I took it too. Everything you just described. Okay, so we've been down in the ashes here, so to speak, for a few moments. And thank you for taking that journey with me. But I want to come back out to another kind of sort of reference to ash. Why? This is so rad. I love this about what you do. Why is eating food cooked over a fire just better?
Oh man, where do I begin? I mean, you can talk about it from a flavor standpoint. Like I think smoke is delicious. I think it's also the environment in which you're eating it. Typically, if you're cooking over a fire, you're also eating it outside. I think there's this element of surprise, especially if you're out cooking over like a rustic pit on a campsite, for example, and people don't expect homemade bread or pizza from a cast iron pan or wild mushroom macaroni and cheese, or one of my favorite recipes in Rooted Kitchen is this like ember roasted pumpkin that is then the vessel for a cheese fondue that's topped with chanterelles and chorizo if you want to just gild the lily.
God. You're killing me right
and
now.
And again, you're eating that outside, like, and, gathered around a fire. So all of those reasons. And also for me, there is, again, this is going back to this, I'm just trusting my own experience that I feel in my body, in my soul. There is something that happens that feels so deeply embedded in my DNA when I'm cooking over the fire that like it's almost like I can see the ancestors being like, yes, this is how we did it. And um, I love that it removes the bullshit
Hmm.
um, of like, oh, this needs to be cooked in this pan at this exact temperature, and you need this fancy equipment, and it just breaks it down to the most essential elements, which are um, great ingredients and fire. Um, and to me also then it does remove me a bit from the process because there's less ways in which I can control it. Because when you're cooking over the fire too, like there's the elements, right? Like there's wind that can shift the flames and the coals can go out, and you have to stay so present and so mindful to the process that I lose myself in it. And it is for me again a deep practice of paying attention. um, and it's a great excuse to hang out around a fire and gather people.
It is that. I don't think there's much better. Ash, I got just a couple last things to hit on. We're in this age of AI and algorithms, as we talked about earlier, and sort of a necessary evils, right? To do the work we do. Given that, do you feel like it's possible and maybe even probable to do good work that helps save the things that we love in this age of AI and in this age of information, and be a force for good with the work that you do?
Yes, I do believe it. I have to believe it in order to keep doing the work that I want to do. I um, I have to root myself in hope in order to be able to get out of bed every single morning. You know, I have my own struggles with mental health, and it can feel so daunting at times. And we are constantly bombarded with um, the doomsday, the direness. Absolutely true, but for me and my own sanity and who I am as a person, I need to ground myself in the beauty and the hope of it. And again, this goes back to I'd rather be naive than cynical. And so that is where I need to stay. And I truly do believe that we can move the needle. And I think we are. I think there's this massive awakening that's happening. Um, People probably have tired of me using this reference, but I don't know if you watched the Burn Morel episode of Kitchen Unnecessary. But man, speaking of ashes, there's a type of morel that grows after the devastation of forest fire, and after the like fires are essential to the health of the forest, right? And scientists still don't fully understand why and what it is that occurs that makes these particular morels grow in abundance after fire, but they do. And it is part of this, you know, like the beauty from the ashes. And I think that's this place that we're at right now. I have to believe it. I have to hold on to that hope that it feels so dire and desperate and hopeless at times. But I think that's ultimately where the change and the transition is going to happen.
Brilliant. I appreciate you. I'm got one last bonus question. In this sort of vein that we're in right now, let's just kind of, and it's kind of the world physically we're in too anymore. But thought exercise. Just say that your house was in the line of a wildfire. If you could only take one physical thing, what would that be? And if you could only take one metaphysical thing, a personality trait about yourself that makes Ash Ash, what would that be?
Gosh, I'm like looking around my house and it's like, oh, I love one physical thing. A Okay, the first thing that came, my journal. I think that's, yep. I think I would. Oh, that's hard because
It's
I'm
a
like, I don't
tough
want to
one.
leave behind all the photos.
It's a tough one.
Like, but maybe my phone is already in my pocket, so it's fine because all of our photos are there. So, but yeah, no, the journal was the first thing that came because yeah. The thing about me, it's a toss up between like my creativity because I just don't feel like I'm myself without it, but then also my curiosity. I think those they go hand in hand. Yeah.
Both self-evident
Cheating.
today. Both very evident today, and I'm grateful for you sharing them with me and with us. And Ash, how can people get involved with your work? Where can they find what you're doing?
You can check out my Instagram, Ashrod. My website is ashrod.earth. I write a newsletter called Fireside. And yeah, so much of what we've been talking about is so evident in my latest book, Rooted Kitchen. So thank you for this conversation. Oh my gosh, it's been such a joy, and your questions have been so thoughtful. I've loved the thread of this conversation for sure.
Well, thank you. Honestly, the pleasure is mine to finally meet you virtually in person here, and I hope we can do this again. And I think we'll probably good chance of seeing ourselves in the real world as well. And Ash Rodriguez, thank you for being on the Say What You Love podcast, and we'll see you down the trail.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
How do you say what you love? How do you say what you love? How do you say what you love? How do you say what you love?
Thank you for listening to Save What You Love. If you like what you're hearing, you can help keep these conversations coming your way by giving us a rating on whatever platform you're listening from and leaving a comment on Apple Podcasts. It really helps get the word out. Check out photos on our Instagram feed. We're at Save What You Love Podcast, and you can get links from today's featured guest in the show notes of this episode. Join our growing community by subscribing to our newsletter at avaswild.com and then clicking on Connect in the upper corner. You'll get exclusive offers on wild salmon shipped to your door and notifications about upcoming guests and more great content on the way. That's at avaswild.com, the word save spelled backwards, wild.com. This episode was produced by Emily Fern and edited by Patrick Troll. Original music was created by Whiskey Class. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you all down the trail.